Okay, we're live. How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here, and I wasn't going to do a live today, but this is kind of big news, especially since I just returned from Armenia, and so I wanted to come on and talk about what's going on. Just to bring you up to speed, the Armenian government under the Prime Minister Pashinyan came out and supported a Palestinian state. So they announced today that they're joining. There was 144 other countries in the world who recognized the state of Palestine as a country. Now, you could say, so they become the 145th UN member state that recognizes Palestine as a country. There's a whole lot of questions here, more questions than answers, obviously, because we don't have any idea exactly what they mean when they say that we recognize Palestine as a country, because usually it's kind of hard to recognize a country that doesn't have any territory. So that would be like recognizing the National Basketball Association as a country. Where are they going to live? The NBA is an entity, sure. You could say it's like recognizing the, let's see, recognizing, well, even recognizing the, like an American Indians, they have reservations that they live on. So that would say, you know, if you recognize the Sioux Indian tribe as a nation, then that reservation, I guess, would become their territory. But in this case, the Palestinians are spread out all over the place. There already is a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan, where 60% of the people who live in that country are Palestinian in origin. Okay. And so, yeah, there's now 145 countries. Most recently was Spain, Ireland, and Norway, and Slovenia, who have recognized Palestine as a state. The problem, the biggest problem with this, especially with it happening right now, is that this comes on the heels of what happened on October 7th, when thousands of Palestinians flooded into Israel and raped, murdered, and pillaged that country, killing more than 1,100 people. Do you think that makes this a good time to reward the Palestinians with their own state? This is a group of people who has made it part and parcel of their identity to be against Israel to the point of not even wanting to allow Israelis a country, to say to the point where they would say Israelis are not people, where they should all be killed. All the Israelis should be killed, is what they're saying. And because of that, this is heinous. It's absolutely heinous. Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. This is what Armenia says in their statement. I'll just read you their statement, and then we'll go from there. So they came out and said that Yerevan supports a two-state solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and is, quote, genuinely committed to establishing peace and stability in the Middle East and lasting reconciliation. As if a tiny Asian country of 2.5 million people is going to establish peace and stability in the Middle East. I mean, good luck with that. They also, let's see, I'm trying to find the actual quote here. Armenia deplores using, this is what they said. Armenia deplores using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence toward civilian populations, adding that it joined in the international community in demanding the release of the captives, or the hostages. Al Jazeera likes to call them captives. That sounds a little nicer These are hostages, okay? So here's the thing. Armenia could have easily put out a statement that said exactly that. Armenia deplores the using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence towards civilian populations. And we join with the international community in demanding the release of the captives. They could have easily said that and not recognized officially the state of Palestine, a state that doesn't exist. Well, I mean, it does exist. It's Jordan. And they could have stopped right there, and that would have been fine, because Israel agrees with that statement. Israel absolutely 100% agrees that they deplore using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence towards civilian populations. And they are demanding the release of their captives. So Armenia could have completely straddled the fence on this one and could have said exactly what they said. And the Palestinians could have said, yeah, they support us. And Israel could have said, yeah, they support us. But instead, Armenia had to go further and recognize the state of Palestine. This is a big problem for Armenia, and this is a perfect example of why governments are so bad at this. Governments around the world, so bad at this. Because they're like nine-year-olds on the school playground. They're mad at that bully over there, and so they want to run over and punch him in the nose, or they want to, get a coalition of their buddies to stick their tongues out at him, or something like that. But they don't think about the second and third order effects of their actions. And here's the problem: there are something like 10,000 Armenians who live in Israel. These are Armenian Christians. The Armenian population has been in Israel since the 4th century. They're the longest running single people group in Israel after it became Jewish, other than the Jews. And so that, in Old City of Jerusalem, 25% of the Old City of Jerusalem is called the Armenian Quarter. And the Armenians have been there. They've been supporting Israel for literally millennia. And these 10,000 Armenians are now at odds with the Jews that they live next to. This is a huge problem. There have already been some, bad blood that has brewed between what I would call extremist Jews, very hardcore Jews who are, who don't like anybody who's not Jewish, apparently. And there's been videos of them spitting on Christian tourists that are there in Jerusalem. Now, I can promise you, having lived there for, half of this war, most Jews do not feel that way. Most Jews don't have any problem with Christians. They like Christians. They like Americans. They like Armenians. They don't have any problem with anybody. But there is this small group of extreme. There's lots of wacky sects in Israel. Israel seems to attract all the whack jobs on planet Earth, except for the ones that are like Indian, like Hindu. I'm talking about the weird Christian denominations, the weird Jewish denominations, the weird Muslim denominations. You've got all kinds of even New Age whack jobs that show up in Israel, and they want to commune with the energy that's coming down onto the Temple Mount, stuff like that. And so this is all they need, right? You've already got some tensions between Armenian Christians in Old City of Jerusalem and the Jews, because there's a Jewish company that was sold a piece of land that is part of the Armenian Quarter in Jerusalem. Now, I wouldn't blame that necessarily on the Jews. This Jewish businessman had a talk with a bishop in the Armenian Apostolic Church in the Old City of Jerusalem. And that bishop, in a very corrupt way, sold a piece of property that he didn't have any right to sell to this Jewish businessman so that that guy could build a resort on what's called the Cows something or other. Cows Lot, Cows Gate, Cows something. It's an ancient part of the Old City of Jerusalem that is now serves as a parking lot, and there's precious little parking in the Old City, so that's important. Actually, it's a bigger deal than a parking lot somewhere else, for sure. And the bishop, the Armenian bishop, in a backroom deal, sold that piece of land to this Israeli company to build a resort there. Of course, the rest of the Armenians that live there got very upset about that because they'd have to tear down a bunch of people's houses. The Armenian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem is not so commercialized like the Arab quarter and even the Jewish quarter is. Thank you. I appreciate that, Darian. I appreciate all of you. There's somebody else that donated up here, Right Wing Gun Nut. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And we appreciate PC as well. So they sold this to this Israeli businessman. They were going to have to tear down a whole bunch of, and we're talking about not just people's homes, but ancient homes, 700-year-old homes that are, there, to build this brand new resort that they wanted to build there. And obviously the Armenians took umbrage with that. There are, to this day, a group of young Armenian men who are camped out on that property so that the construction crews cannot move forward. They've had some fistfights in there with the security teams from the construction crew. The police have been involved. It's been just really ugly, and that is ongoing. Okay, but even still, the Armenians have supported Israel for hundreds of years. Now, we have to make a separation. It's important for us to think about the government of Israel versus the Jews or the Israeli people. Because the government is, I wouldn't say they're completely secular, although they're certainly not ultra religious in Israel. But what the government does, you can certainly be opposed to something that the Israeli government does and not necessarily opposed to the Jewish people. When the Bible commands us to bless Israel, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to bless everything the Israeli government does. I mean, look what they did on COVID. Their response to COVID was as close to, tyranny as any country on planet Earth. And there are a lot of things that the Israeli government does that are 100% anti-biblical, that are just plain wrong, and they ought to be called out for that. And in a free country, because Israel is a free country, they can be called out for that. And that's good. That's a good thing. But so I don't have a problem with opposing something that the Israeli government does and still supporting Israel as a nation. Israel as a nation has a right to exist. They have a right to the land. They actually have a right to a lot more land than they currently occupy. They have a right to occupy and populate Judea, Samaria, and Hebron. Actually, if you went back to the land that was given to them by God, they would also have the right to populate Jordan. But they have agreed to let the Palestinian and Bedouin government of Jordan have their country. And that is your country of Palestine. So a lot of people have said, well, the Palestinians don't have anywhere to go. Actually, they do. I mean, they're 60% of the people that live in Jordan are Palestinian. Now, Jordan does not want to take 2.5 million people from Gaza. And so there is that. There is the problem of what to do with the people in Gaza. The Palestinians who live in Gaza, some of whom are Christians, are in a tough spot because they can't really move somewhere else. And this is a problem for Israel as well, because Israel is having a hard time living next door to a group of people who wants to eliminate them, right? And so in the midst of all this, the country of Armenia decides that now is the time that they need to come out and recognize the state of Palestine, a state that has no land, that has no boundaries, a state that doesn't exist, and that the people of that state don't want, I mean, they want their own country. It's called Israel. They want all of it. And that's the only thing they're going to be happy with. The vast majority of Palestinians do not want Israel to exist. They do not recognize Israel's right to have their own state. So if Armenia says, well, we're doing this to put pressure on Israel to allow a two-state solution, there's no allowing about it, because the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution and Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. So you're trying to impose, there are 145 countries in the United Nations are trying to impose on Israel and the Palestinians something that none of them want. Now, the Palestinian Authority, who governs the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, under the Oslo Accords from the 1990s, the Palestinian Authority is making noises like, we appreciate this. This will really help for us to get a Palestinian state. We support a two-state solution. I saw that today and I was like, what? The Palestinian government does not support a two-state solution. They're making noises like they do because they see it as a stepping stone to taking over all of Israel. Their idea of a two-state solution is the Palestinians control all of the region, including all of what is today Israel, and we will let the Jews continue to live there, but they'll have to live there as dhimmi, as second-class citizens. And you can imagine how that would go. There'd be a whole lot of murdered Jews if that was the case. So Armenia is not thinking very clearly about what this will do, about how this looks to the Palestinians. This looks like being rewarded for October 7th. This looks like encouraging another October 7th. Hey, you guys go for it. Good job. Go kill some more Israelis. That's what it looks like to, to the people in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. This is what it looks like. Now, I can guarantee you this video is going to get demonetized because of the words that I'm using here. I am not at all calling for any kind of violence against anybody in this, and it doesn't really matter because the algorithm is going to demonetize this video. So I certainly appreciate those of you who are donating through the YouTube, doing the super chat thing, because that's the only money this video is going to make. I can almost guarantee you that. But we have to talk about this. It's a short-sighted, ridiculous, and actually hypocritical decree by Israel. This is like saying that Azerbaijan has the right to take over Western Azerbaijan, which is Armenia. This is about like saying the same thing, because Israel is the aggrieved party here. Israel is the one that was attacked on October 7th. Everything that follows after October 7th is Israel's reaction to what was done to them, and it is completely justified. Is there suffering in Gaza? Yes. Not enough. Not enough. If there was more suffering in Gaza, if the suffering had been more acute, the war would have already been over. But because the world body is trying to, they really believe that when you have a war, the best thing to do is to support both sides of the conflict with American tax dollars. Go and pay for both sides of the war. That's the best way to have a war. Well, that's the best way to have a war that never ends. That's the best way to go bankrupt in trying to have a war. The only way to win a war is to cause so much pain and suffering to your enemy and your enemy's people that they beg you to stop and beg for quarter. They beg for a solution. Well, the Palestinians are not begging for a solution. They feel like they're winning this war right now. And why do they feel like they're winning? Because Armenia just recognized Palestine as a nation. They've now got 145 countries in the United Nations that are recognizing them as a nation. So they're like, hey, this is costing us. We're of course, some of our people are getting killed. We've lost a lot of fighters. We've lost a lot of buildings. We've got, Gaza is a mess, but we're winning. We're winning the war because we got the whole world on our side now. They're all punishing Israel for defending itself, and they're rewarding us for attacking Israel. This is great. But again, Armenia, even if Armenia was on board with that, which I don't think they are, I don't think Armenia, just reading their statement here, I don't think Armenia wants Israel to lose the war. I don't think Armenia believes Israel does not have a right to defend itself. I don't think Armenia, as a government or as a people, is saying we want Israel to be destroyed. But that's the message that they're sending with this recognition. They're sending that message to the terrorists. And that doesn't help Armenia in the long run, because when terrorism is allowed to flourish anywhere, it makes terrorism more likely everywhere. And Armenia has been the victim of terror from Azerbaijan and Turkey in the very recent past. In September of last year, Azerbaijan flooded into Armenian Artsakh, an Armenian exclave, and literally murdered people, beheaded people. I've got videos of them machine gunning people's houses, and kicked out 120,000 Armenians from their homes. And so somebody just asked how many member states are in the United Nations. There's 193 total members of the United Nations. So a vast majority of the 193 countries in the United Nations have now recognized the state of Palestine, which doesn't have any land. Some of them have said, have tried to define what land they're talking about when they made the recognition. The problem with that is that some of that land actually isn't even Palestinian inhabited right now. It's land that's part of Israel. That Israel would literally have to give up entire cities if Israel went along with this. Big cities. And you know what the irony is? If tomorrow Israel said, okay, we surrender, 145 out of 193 countries in the United Nations have recognized the state of Palestine. And so therefore, the Israeli government, we're going to stop fighting. We're going to recognize the state of Palestine. They can have their own country. How long do you think it would be before there were Palestinians killing Jews wherever the Jews actually ended up living. If Israel just said, okay, the Palestinians can have all the West Bank, they can have Gaza, that's their country. They can have their own passports, they can have their own border checkpoints. It's their country. They can do whatever they want to with it. How long do you think it would be before rockets flew out of those areas into the rest of Israel? How long do you think it would be before a Palestinian guy took a knife and started stabbing people in the old city of Jerusalem? How long do you think it would be before a couple of jack wagons took a car and started running over IDF soldiers in the street or civilians? Days? A week? Probably not. It's happening every day now. So this is why Israel cannot agree to this, because it would be like slitting their own throats. They'd be agreeing to their own demise. And a two-state solution is not the solution unless one of those two states is Jordan. So maybe Armenia should get with the rest of the world and have the rest of the world convince the rest of the world to put pressure on Jordan to accept all the Palestinians, clear out the West Bank, clear out Gaza, move them all over into Jordan. Jordan's got a lot of empty land. A lot. I've been there. And let Jordan become the Palestinian state. You got some more taxpayers. King, there you go. Now, Rex Laughlin says, do you believe Armenia is being pressured? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about why Armenia would make this decision, especially now. I see three possible scenarios. Firstly, you might know, Armenia they're not really happy with Israel, okay? I just came from Armenia. I went to the Genocide Museum while I was there just a few days ago. And Armenia recognizes the Holocaust in their museum for their own genocide. There's a wall that recognizes other genocides around the world. And in there is a whole blurb about the Holocaust. There's a statue in Yerevan that honors the victims of the Holocaust. And yet, the Israeli government has never officially recognized the Armenian genocide. Now, again, you separate the government from the people, because the people certainly do recognize the Armenian genocide. You hear people talk about it a lot after the war started. Even politicians will trot out the Armenian genocide when they want to say something bad about Turkey. So it's not like they deny that it ever happened. They have just not officially recognized the Armenian genocide, partially because they have a very tenuous and complicated relationship with Turkey, and recognizing the Armenian genocide would put their relationship with Turkey at risk. However, as I've always said, the sign of a bad government, a bad leadership, is leadership that makes their decisions based on politics first and morality second. Good leaders make their decisions based on what's ethical, what's moral, what's right and wrong, and they let the politics take care of themselves. A good government would do what is right just because it's right and worry about the politics later. Israel doesn't always do that. Armenia doesn't always do that. America very rarely does that anymore. And so the Armenians, if you see, why did they do this? One reason could be that they're just angry with Israel because Israel has not officially recognized the genocide. They support Azerbaijan. They sell weapons to Azerbaijan, which they should not do. But I can tell you why they do it. Israel supports Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan is against Iran. Israel is focused on their greatest enemy, Iran, more than anything else. And so they support anybody who is against Iran. Azerbaijan is against Iran. I would venture to say few people in Israel have given any thought at all to how their country's relationship with Azerbaijan affects Armenia. Because Armenia doesn't have anything to offer Israel. Armenia is just a tiny little country over there somewhere. They probably are not familiar with the conflict between Israel and Azerbaijan in any meaningful way. And Azerbaijan has gas and oil that it can sell to Israel, which Israel needs, and Israel can sell weapons to Azerbaijan, and therefore there's some trade there. So it's against Iran, it's a trade partner, and they've got gas and oil. They don't give one thought to the fact that Azerbaijan is a corrupt terrorist organization, a terrorist regime that's run by a dictator that oppresses its own citizens and is existentially threatening Armenia. They don't give one thought to that. They should, but they don't, because they're thinking from an economic standpoint, from a political standpoint, and not from a moral standpoint. So that's wrong. Israel should not be supporting Azerbaijan. Certainly should not be selling them weapons. Now, I have to say, Israel would probably very happily sell weapons to Armenia if Armenia wanted to buy weapons from Israel. Israel sells weapons to all kinds of people. That's one of their big industries. So I don't think that Israel hates Armenia. They certainly are not happy with Armenia now. But Armenia, many Armenians do hate Israel. Maybe don't hate the Israeli people. Maybe don't hate Jews per se. There are very few Jews who live in Armenia, and they live there just fine. There's one synagogue that garners about 100 people on holidays, in Armenia. But, so the number of Jews in Armenia is probably under 1,000, if I had to guess. There was an attack on the one synagogue in Yerevan where somebody threw a firebomb at the front door and set the door on fire. But after an investigation, as it turns out, that was probably an agent provocateur. It was probably an FSB agent from Russia who flew into Armenia, attacked the synagogue, and flew back out, trying to drive a wedge between Armenia and Israel. So that brings me to the second possible reason why Armenia would recognize Palestine now, and do it now, is because there are still Russian troops in Armenia. When we were just there, we talked to some of them. I walked up and talked to a group of Russian troops. My wonderful my wonderful daughter-in-law, who speaks Russian, was translating for me, and I was just asking them about the age of the vehicle that they were in, and they said he said it's a 19 model, and Rubina said 1919, which did not make those guys very happy. Now, Russia has pulled out most of its troops from Armenia they had a bunch of peacekeepers there after the war in 2020. But there is still a military base in Gyumri, and there are still some troops in Sunik province. We saw them in a place called Vaik, which is right on the border of Sunik province. So perhaps Armenia made this declaration because if you watch yesterday's podcast, yesterday's live that I did, I talked about why or how Russia is supporting Hamas in this war, why Russia wants this war to go on, because it's dilutive of the United States' energy and resources against the war in Ukraine. So perhaps Armenia got some pressure from Russia or wanted to please Russia a little bit. Maybe there've been some really bad blood between Russia and Armenia lately. So that's one possibility, but I kind of doubt that to be the case, because right now Armenians are not happy with Russia. They probably like Israel more than they like Russia at the moment. At least a lot of Armenians. There are still some Armenians who, especially older ones, who they had it easier under the Soviet Union, and they wish that the Soviet Union would come back, because then you didn't have to think about where your next meal was coming from, because they just sent you money every month. They just, it was up to the government to pay for everything. And now you have to work hard, So, yeah, Rubina says, I was pretty embarrassed about that. Look, I don't blame you, Rubina. It looked like it was a truck. It was a van from 1919. It did. And I don't believe it's a 2019. There's just no way. That truck was like a 80s model or something. Maybe they still make them to look like that, but I highly doubt it. I mean, I looked inside that thing. That was not a new vehicle. Anyway, so I don't blame you, but the Russians were not super happy about Rubina saying that their truck looked like it was from 1919. Anyway, the third possibility for why Armenia might have chosen now to do this is the other side of the coin from wanting to placate Russia. And that is, perhaps they wanted to placate the United States and the United Nations. They looked at the United Nations and they saw that all these European countries were recognizing Palestine. And Armenia right now has a kind of a crisis of identity. It's a wonderful country. It's a beautiful country. It's a safe country specifically because of their Christian heritage. And yet they're in a really bad neighborhood in Asia. And it is in Asia. Armenia is an Asian country. I mean, by every traditional definition, if you're east of Istanbul, you're in Asia. But they really badly want to be a European country. And they would make a good one. I mean, they look more like a European country than many European countries do anymore, because a lot of European countries are starting to look like a North African country, specifically Paris, Rome, lots of places in Italy, in Barcelona. These ancient capitals of Europe are now starting to look more like someplace in North Africa. Even in places like Austria, go get on the subway and you'd think you're in Istanbul or someplace. So Armenia, I've had so many Armenians when I say Armenia is the safest country in Asia, and they say, we're not Asian, we're European. Don't say that. Don't say we're in Asia, we're European. And I'm like, you can't be a European country. I'm sorry. You're in Asia. So, well, we identify as Asian. As European. Yeah, well, you can identify as an elephant too, but you're not. That's like saying that Costa Rica could decide that it's a European country now. You're just not in Europe. Sorry, you're not. But Armenia is leaning toward Europe, just like Ukraine, for very good reasons. They want to have a more liberal government. They want to get away from the former Soviet Union and the corruption that happened after the Soviet Union fell. They want to be a more modern, country. And so they look at Europe and they say, that's what we want to be like. We want to emulate that. They look at America and they say, we want to emulate the good things about America. And so, man, if 145 UN countries have recognized Palestine, maybe we can, we're like that skinny kid in the schoolyard that's trying to get in with the popular kids. The popular kids are all vaping, so he goes and, well, I'm going to vape too. Now, I want to be cool like the cool kids. And I think that might actually be the most likely reason why Armenia did this. Because it's not positive for Armenians in the diaspora. Armenians around the world are not going to be better off because Armenia did this, especially the 10,000 Armenians who live in Israel. It's not good for them in that way. It literally is punishing Israel for defending itself and rewarding Hamas for terror attacks on Israel. There were more terror attacks on Israel from Hamas yesterday, and I think a few today. If you just look on the Shofar app, it's like I almost don't even notice it anymore because of the this app that comes up, and so those are from the north. Confrontation line, Gaza envelope. 20 hours ago, there were rockets flying out of Gaza into Israel. 20 hours ago. And what does Armenia do? Recognizes Palestine as a country. That's not going to stop this. That's not going to make this better. This is a perfect example of a government that is making its decisions based on the political ramifications and not based on what is right. Not based on the ethical, the moral principles. And oh, please God, show me a country that stands first, whose government stands first on what is moral and right and could care less about the politics, and I'll show you a country that'd be worth living in. But just like the worst thing about churches is that they're all full of people, imperfect people, the worst thing about governments is that they're made up of people. And people are short-sighted and selfish and make, Nathan, this jackwagon that's saying Allahu Akbar needs to go. So if you can get rid of him, that'd be helpful. By the way, those of you who are my regular viewers, I've been thinking about this for a couple days. Perhaps One Tired Mama. I mean, she's on here every single live. If you want to be a cool kid, One Tired Mama, send me an email. Let's have a talk, because I think I would like to make you a moderator on our live since you're here anyway. I'd like to hand you a smite button so you could help get rid of some of the idiots that come on here and cause problems. I very much appreciate those of you who come on here all the time. And it's not just One Tired Mama, but she's on here now. But this is a very bad day for Armenia, and it will not help Armenia in the long run. The second and third order effects of this kind of decision are going to prolong the human suffering in Gaza. They're going to prolong the human suffering in Israel. They're not going to likely, it's not going to likely make the Western world go, oh, Armenia recognized Palestine, therefore let's let them join the United Nations. I'm not United Nations. Let's let them join NATO. No, it's not going to help Armenia. It's a short-sighted decision, and it's most likely based on politics over morality, and that's always a bad thing. So it makes me very sad to say that. I love Armenia. I love Israel. The people in Armenia don't hate Israel, or at least the Israelis. Israelis that I've met don't hate Armenians. This is how governments cause wars. You know, when I was in Armenia over the last couple of months, there are a ton of Russian tourists. It's easy to get from Russia, especially southern Russia, Very easy to get to Armenia, and it's a great place to go on vacation. So there are Russian people everywhere. And I've been learning Russian, so I'm trying to practice my Russian every day. And of course, the best way to learn a language is to actually speak it with someone. And so when I happen to be in line behind some Russians or run into some at a monastery or something like that, I engage them in conversation. A lot of them actually speak English. And you know what? I talked to dozens of Russians over the last several months, and I didn't find one, not one, who said, "Oh, you're American? Get out of my face. I don't want to have anything to do with you. You're our enemy." Governments go to war. People don't. People don't want to go to war. Governments go to war. And it's the people who suffer. So if we were to try to give Armenia the benefit of the doubt here and believe, the statement that they crafted was a very good statement. I'll read it again. Armenia deplores using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence towards civilian populations. Armenia deplores that. And we join the international community in demanding the release of the captives. Nothing wrong at all with that statement. Good for you, Armenia, for crafting a very, very good statement. And they could just say, hey, this isn't aimed at Israel or aimed at Gaza, either one. It's just if the shoe fits, right? The difference is that Israel would read that statement and say, we agree with that statement 100%. Hamas would read that statement and say, absolutely not. Using civilian infrastructure as shields, that's what we do. That's how we win. Violence towards civilian populations, that's what we did October 7th. That was great. We were heroes for doing it. And that tells you what side you ought to be on in this conflict. But apparently, Armenia didn't read its own statement, because it made a perfect, wonderful statement like that and then came down on the side of the terrorists. What? And I just have this to say to the government of Armenia, to whatever moron decided that it would be a good idea to recognize Palestine, shame on you. Shame on you. And I hope that the Armenian people will say that as well. And I hope that the Armenian people will demand a retraction from their leadership. Now, Armenians love to tell you that they're the world's first Christian country. I would like to know whether Armenia is still a Christian country. See, you don't get to claim Christianity just because your ancestors were Christian. You become a Christian. If you're going to be a Christian, you paddle your own canoe. So if you're Armenian and you're listening to this message, and you're so proud of the fact that Armenia is a Christian country, I would just say this to you. Righteousness exalts a nation. You, yourself, need to demand righteousness from your leadership and from yourself, from the person that you look at in the mirror every day. That's the only way Armenia will still be a Christian country. If you want Armenia to have the honor of claiming that it was the first Christian nation, but yet Armenia today does not carry on that Christianity, then you also bear the dishonor of giving up or diluting the faith of your forefathers. And I think that as Americans, as Christians, and as Armenians, we should all pray that the Armenian people would stand up for righteousness. All right, let's see if we've got any questions here. Uh, let's see, we got 1,000 people online, and how many likes we got? Let's go hit the like button for me, would you? 409 likes. Come on, people, you can do better than that. Let's get to 500 likes on there. That tells YouTube's algorithm that this is worth watching, and then they go show it to people who haven't seen this channel before, and we can get this message out to more people. This is one of the things, you know, so many people in Armenia are hampered by the fact that they only watch Russian state media, and so they don't get the truth. They get very skewed reporting. So many people in America get unbelievably skewed reporting because they're watching the mainstream media, they're watching MSNBC or CNN. Every time something like this happens and I see people that are so deceived, it makes me say, wow, I've got a very, very important job. I would like nothing more right now than to be out there with my family. I've got 25 family members here for a family reunion. And I've got several of my grandkids here. I want to be out there spending time with them. But I've taken an hour out of my day to do this because this is important. People need to understand the truth. And I'm going to do my best to bring it to you. So if you want to support that, go to chuckholton.com and you can support me over there. If you want, if you have comments for me, you can go to hotzoneholton@gmail.com is my email address. And okay, everybody clap for One Tired Mama. I just made One Tired Mama a moderator for the channel. So congratulations and thank you very much for coming on every single live. I would think something really bad had gone wrong if I went on live and I didn't see you on here, because you're just here all the time. And I really appreciate that. So let's continue to pray for Israel. Let's continue to pray for Armenia. Both countries need it. And while we're at it, let's pray for America. We need it too. All right. God bless you all. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to go spend time with my grandkids. And you might not hear from me until Monday or so, because I'm going to really try, unless just something really big happens. I'm going to try not to do any more lives or anything other than just working around the farm and loving on my grandbabies for the next couple days. So if you want, go to chuckholton.com and I'll put up a couple pictures of me loving on my grandbabies. All right. Love you guys. God bless you. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.